Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here in Brazil. Brazil is one of our largest markets. Sao Paulo is the largest city in the world on Waze. And the love we have for Brazil and Brazil has for Waze is really legendary. So it's a great honor to be here and to try and talk a little bit about tomorrow. So at Waze, we've been dealing with traffic for a long time. And we have over 130 million users every month that use our app. And they use it all over the world. And this allows us to see trends in traffic everywhere. And one of the interesting things is every person you meet tells you that their city is the worst traffic in the world. Doesn't matter where they're from. If you're from Sao Paulo, you think you have the worst traffic. If you're from Los Angeles, you think you have the worst traffic. And you're all right. Traffic is terrible and is getting worse. And we've seen that over the last 10 years. And so we're talking about tomorrow. What will tomorrow look like? This is what tomorrow is going to look like. The trend we're on right now is to have increased traffic and really end up worse than we are today. 5 years ago or 10 years ago, if someone would say you'd be commuting 2 hours to work, you'd say that could never be. Today in Sao Paulo, many of you spend 2-3 hours a day in traffic. This is driven more than anything by the increase in urbanization. Projections have it that 70% of humans will live in large metropolitan areas. We will all be living in areas that were never designed to host millions and tens of millions of people. And there's no infrastructure to support this. We're talking about projections of needing about $40 trillion in infrastructure over the next 20 years to handle this growth. I don't know about you, but I'm not seeing any government putting this kind of money to place. And in many ways, it's too late. We should have made this investment 50 years ago or 100 years ago. But we made a decision 100 years ago or 50 years ago, we made this decision that we're going to build cities for cars. We're not going to build them for humans. We're going to build them for cars. And if you look at the space that cities take, most of it is driven for cars. And these cars are creating 30% of the emissions. We're burning up the planet, and we're doing it every day, 1 kilometer at a time, as we commute to work and back, sitting in traffic. And this is the path we're on. In Brazil, about 80% of the roads are full of cars, and they only carry 20% of the commuters. Think about that. Think about how inefficient that is. And this is what we have now. And Brazil, like every other country, is buying a lot more cars than it's building roads. But we can't envision a different tomorrow. Right? We're all here in this conference to see how we can imagine a tomorrow that's different. How can our children have a different future than what we have today in our present? And this future that we're imagining, think about what made the internet. Being able to transmit a bit of data for free anywhere in the world. That created this network that brought together social networks and search and all these different things. Imagine if transportation networks worked that way. Imagine if we could transport an atom, a person, a box, a device, something physical, for practically no cost, at practically no restriction anywhere. This is what most of the technologies here are talking about. How can we dramatically change the future? This future that we're imagining, where transportation is suddenly smooth and free, think about the real estate it frees up. These mega cities we're talking about half of the real estate is designed for cars. We have roads, we have parking lots, we have garages for cars, not for humans. What do we do with that space suddenly, if suddenly transportation becomes very, very different? What new business opportunities open up? What would you do with additional space? Think about how this city could operate when suddenly these things change fundamentally. We have over 1 million people a year as fatalities of transportation. of humans driving. That's our decision by the way we built our networks. And we could change all that. In Brazil, people spend more money on transportation than on food. Think of the disposable income that frees up if transportation becomes practically free. And you can move anywhere in a very short amount of time. Talking about time, people in Sao Paulo spend a month every year in traffic. A month. What would you do with an extra month? Right? Some of us will say we'll go to the gym, and that's our excuse. We're missing that month, right? But suddenly we'd have a month of time. Think about the business opportunities that would open up. Think about the family time. Think about the health impact that this would have. And when we talk about health, there's a direct correlation between the length of your commute and your health. Your blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, depression, even divorce rates are correlated to the length of your commute. So we could change all that by, again, moving to a world of free traffic. And this decision of which type of tomorrow we're going to go to is being decided right now. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. So 20 years ago, we didn't invest in transportation infrastructure. That's a mistake we all did. Every country in the world, all of us are responsible. But today is the second best time to begin changing transportation. So that 20 years from now, we don't need to be there, and we could be here. So what are these changes that we need to do? You know, we like to think about them as this one big change in transportation, but they're actually four very, very different trends. Each one of these changes can happen on its own, but we need all of them to happen if we're going to reach that new world that we're talking about. These changes are electrification, autonomous vehicles, transportation as a service, and obviously shared mobility. And again, each one of these things is going on today. Many people in the room are involved in these changes, but without them, or without even one of them, we're not going to get there. So electrification. We're all imagining this future world as being cleaner, right? 30% of emissions are coming from transportation. But today we don't have the battery capacity to really move to electrification. We're still producing our energy out of fossil fuels. And so all these changes are going to have to happen if we're going to move to transportation that actually supports our planet and doesn't burn up our planet. Autonomous cars, there's a tremendous amount of talk about them, and there are many companies here showing them. Autonomous cars are critical for this future. Autonomous cars are probably the biggest technological challenge of our generation. This is equivalent to the atom bomb, or to going to the moon, or to building the internet. It's a technological challenge of epic proportions. And unlike the other ones, this is not being funded by government. It's being funded by private companies. Think about that for a minute. The largest technological changes we've always seen were funded by governments. And now we're funding it by individual companies. There's a question I always get asked about, when will autonomous cars come? And today you can ride in autonomous cars. But when I say autonomous cars arriving, I'm asking, when will the average person have ridden in an autonomous car? Not someone in Silicon Valley or someone who's in the industry, or one of us. A lot of us have probably driven or ridden in self-driving cars. But when will the average person see that? And let's think for a minute, what has to happen to get there? So first, we have this huge technological challenge, right? The largest technology companies in the world are working on it. It will get solved. It is definitely not easy. But once it gets solved, we have a regulatory challenge. Who's responsible for self-driving cars? What's the insurance regime? Where can they drive and how? And let's say we get through that. We have a production challenge. There are about 1 billion cars driving the roads today. We're talking about that doubling by 2040. So 2 billion cars. The global manufacturing capacity of vehicles is about 75 million. So even if today we solved the technology challenge, and we decided today that we want to do this, and we had the batteries being produced somewhere, we don't have the capacity to replace all our cars overnight. But let's say we figure out the production issues. We then run into a question of the business model. What is the business model of this huge investment? And that's a very challenging model because you're basically competing against traditional cars. You know, the airline industry changed the world. The airline industry drives economics and drives our society in different ways. It's a huge technological challenge to build planes that can fly all over the world. It's not a great business model. Airlines go bankrupt all the time. We're going to have similar challenges when we think about autonomous cars because your competition is a $16,000 car and a $30,000 person driving manually. So we have great challenges. Autonomous cars are coming, and they're part of the future. But we all as society have huge challenges how to bring them into production, how to scale them, how to pay for them. Let's say we have electric self-driving cars. If we continue to buy cars ourselves and own them ourselves, we haven't really reached that tomorrow that we're talking about. Today we buy cars and they sit idle 96% of the time. Not only do they sit idle, we pay for them to sit idle in parking lots. So we have to move away from this idea of owning our own car and move to transportation as a service. You know, I like to call traffic the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you have a Ferrari or if you have a 1985 Honda Civic. We're both sitting in traffic going the same speed, right? There's no advantage when it comes to traffic. So transportation as a service stops looking at the car as the product and looks at the ride as the product. The product is getting from point A to B. The product is not what car you drive. Maybe it's a scooter, maybe it's a bicycle, maybe it's a self-driving car. Who cares what color it is? It's getting us from point A to B. Transportation as a service has started today. We see this with ride sharing, we see this with scooters, with a whole range of mobility products that are just starting out, that can all deliver the same product, getting you from point A to B, regardless of who owns the car. And this is a very significant change. Take a country like America, where car companies for decades have spent billions of dollars convincing us that our identity is the car that we drive. We fell for it, right? We will spend tremendous amounts of money buying our cars. It's the second biggest investment. So transportation as a service is critical for us to get to where we want to go. And the last point is shared mobility. We can have self-driving cars that are driven by electricity and are owned by networks that we share. But if we sit alone in the car, we will not change the way our world is built, and that traffic will not change. And this is a critical part of this journey to tomorrow, and this is what Waze has taken on itself. We're looking at how can we make this change. What does this change mean? So if you take 60 people and you want them to drive alone in their cars, they're going to need this much infrastructure, right? This is the infrastructure for driving 60 people. Now, this is the infrastructure if they're driving alone, if I'm driving myself. But if a ride-hailing driver is driving, I need the same infrastructure. And if a computer is driving, I still need the same infrastructure. If we stay the way we've built our networks today and just make a technological change, so instead of me driving, the computer's driving, we need the same infrastructure and we don't solve traffic. But again, we're trying to transport 60 people. And 60 people don't need that much space. 60 people, if they're carpooling together, if they're sharing the car, if they're using all the seats in the car that you've paid for anyway, they take a fraction of the infrastructure that we need. And this can happen today. If we want to get to that tomorrow, we have to make this change today, because by the time that tomorrow happens, we have to be used to sharing our transportation options. And so this has been the essence behind Waze Carpool. You know, Waze has always been around finding shortcuts, finding ways to use our road infrastructure better. And we see more than anyone that we're out of options. The road, too many cars, not enough roads. There really are no more options. And so we looked at the next piece of infrastructure we can optimize, and those are really those 4 seats. And what Waze Carpool does, it tries to match you up with people who live next to you and work next to you and leave more or less at the same time. And it tries to connect you so that you can leave your car at home a few days a week and ride with someone else, and they can leave their car at home and ride with you. And remember, every day you left your car at home and you rode with someone on a ride that's happening anyway, you're part of the solution. You took a car off the road. And although most of our users, we launched Carpool in Brazil in August. Since we launched it, we've done over 2 million carpools in Brazil alone. That's 2 million rides that would have taken a car and now don't. And many of the people that came to carpool with us, they came for the hard reasons. They wanted to save money, they wanted to save time, they wanted to find alternative transportation methods. But what happens out of it is they stay for many different soft issues. They meet their neighbors, they make friends, they discover that riding together is better than driving on your own. And some of them are here in the audience. But instead of me explaining, because my Portuguese is a little poor, we thought we'd let our users tell you their stories.
Posso dizer, hoje eu dei mais de 500 caronas.
Já peguei cerca de 400 caronas.
Estou na média de 150.
160 caronas.
Todas com muito sucesso, com muita segurança.
Tem dia que tem 4, 5, 6 pessoas, mas não cabe no carro. Eu já falei, vou comprar um carro de 7 lugares, vou colocar todo mundo junto, que aí a gente não vai ter problema mais.
Realmente a palavra aqui é comunidade.
A gente tem ganho de se conectar com as pessoas, né?
Como foi as férias?
Valeu a pena. Peguei um dia bom também. Eu me sinto parte de um grupo. Eu não consigo imaginar o meu dia começando sem pegar uma carona, sem ver as pessoas que eu vejo todos os dias.
A carona me transformou numa pessoa mais aberta, uma pessoa mais atenta. Eu não tomo uma multa faz mais de um ano.
E é muito bacana fazer parte dessa mudança, de pensar, será que eu preciso mesmo ter um carro? Ou será que eu posso guardar meu dinheiro para fazer coisas que são realmente importantes para mim?
Estou contribuindo para menos congestionamento, estou contribuindo para um ambiente mais saudável.
Hoje a minha vida é outra.
Quem hoje é usuário do Carpool já é parte dessa transformação.
E eu tenho orgulho de estar desde o começo, sabe?
This has been our first year in Brazil with Waze Carpool. We've launched in 4 countries in the world. And we want to start that change today, that change of sharing our mobility. But the biggest challenge we find, and yes, there are big technological challenges and operational challenges, but the biggest one is changing the behavior. We're used to driving alone. This is what we do every day. To move from there to there is a mindset. It's a change we all have to make in our minds. And everyone sitting here needs to take responsibility for this and make this change. But this is not something that we can do by ourselves. We need the whole ecosystem needs to work together here to make this happen. We as Waze are obviously dedicated to it. We have an amazing community and users who are helping make this happen. Employers have an important role. Cities have a very important role in taking initiative here. And we all need to work here as one ecosystem if we actually want to reach that tomorrow that we all envision. Cities have a very important role in defining the carrots and the sticks to help nudge people in the right direction, to make the right decision. Think about carpool lanes. Carpool lanes provide great value if you have multiple people in the car. You can drive faster, and that's a great carrot. They also provide a stick. If you're riding alone, it's going to take you longer to get where you're going. You're going to sit in traffic longer. This is an example of a way to nudge people in the right direction. Some cities have taken really aggressive roles in trying to support this. For example, in the San Francisco Bay, the MTC is actually funding rides. They say they'll give you your first 5 rides for free to try it out, and they will pay for it, right? And this is the kind of thinking that cities need to begin going through about how do we change our citizens' behavior. In Brazil, we have a very interesting relationship with Joinville. They've been very, very aggressive in supporting and promoting carpool. They've brought over 200 employers in their city together to help promote the service. They've set up physical locations for pickup and drop-off for carpooling. And these are examples of a city taking initiative. Because, again, we're all in this together. We all sit in traffic together, whether you work for the city or whether you work for Waze. Employers have taken a very important leadership role in this. And these are just some of the larger companies that have joined us in trying to promote this. Sustainability impacts all of us. Getting your employees to work in a reasonable amount of time is becoming harder and harder for employers. It's becoming harder to recruit people and to hire people because they have no way of getting there, or because it takes them 2 hours in traffic to get where they're going. So we've seen great support from our partners on the employment side. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's a quote from Margaret Mead that basically says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." The people you see here on the right are those thoughtful, committed citizens. Small group of people who've taken the future in their own hands. And together with us and the employers and the cities, we are all committed to make this happen. And my request to all of you, everyone sitting here, you all have roles in the industry, but you also all drive. We have to make the change. It's a small group of people. When we started out in Waze, there was a small group of people who got together and said, we can do things differently. And today, Waze is all over the world. The same thing is happening with carpool. There's a small group of committed citizens and employers and cities who are taking initiative. And we need to do this today so that we can reach the tomorrow that we are all thinking about. Thank you very much.